Climate change, natural catastrophes, flooding and heat waves. Think of the recent floods in Germany, the Netherlands and Belgium. They have an increasingly impact on our lives. Yet, only a quarter of the European population is insured against these events. Why is that? Amélie Breitburd certainly has a strong opinion about this, and also how this should be solved. Amélie is the CEO of Lloyd Europe, and we're very pleased to have her here on stage. Please welcome Amélie Breitburd.
Good morning, everyone. Very happy to be with you here today. I'm Amélie, the CEO for Lloyd Europe. I thought I would start with a little bit of history. If you think about, so once upon a time, there was this coffee shop in London, and you think about this George Lloyd's, and he was having this very cool place, a kind of Starbucks of the 17th century. And in that coffee shop, you were having ship owners, brokers, and you had those blackboards where you would have the name of the ships. And some of those guys here were computing kind of premiums, and they were literally putting their number under the ship that they were about to cover. And those were called underwriters, literally. And that's how it all began. So there was this place, and it was really the first marketplace for insurance products in Europe and in the world. Then, if you then fast forward, Lloyd's was the first to create the first burglary policy, for example, or in 1934, the first D&O policy, and that was just after the crisis when the first boards were created. So you could see that it was a really innovative place. And now, if we look at where we are today, so that's the iconic building in London that some of you may have visited, and if you haven't yet, come over and you'll see how it works. It's a real exchange place, and you would come here as a customer or with your broker, and you go on the floor, and you're going to get 5 to 10 quotes, and those are going to be really fair prices because there's strong competition on the floor. And what you would feel as well, so the place has changed a little bit. It's more diverse, as you can see. I'm a woman, while in the previous pictures there were lots of men around, and it's not the only diversity that we try to where we try to make progress. So quite an innovative place, and what we try to do here is share risk to create a braver world, and a braver and more innovative world. And then if we look at those risks that we are facing today, so obviously cyber risk, it's all over. If you think about December last year, and the Java kind of open window where everybody started to enter into your IT systems, it showed that that kind of risk were not only more often taking place, but it was what we call a systemic risk, which is it's no longer independent. It happens to more people at the same time. So we have cyber risk, and there's not a lot of insurance out there. At the moment, Lloyd's has 20% of that market, but not a lot of people are covered. Then if we move to climate change, well, climate change is everywhere. We could see over the summer probably more ice melted on the planet. If we think about Europe, where we are based, and you think about the floods that were mentioned in the Netherlands, in Belgium, we are quite exposed to that risk, and the ocean, the ice melting and the level of the ocean increasing. And you can think about the big one, which at some point will come. And it's all about solidarity. If you think about here in Munich, are we exposed to those kinds of floods? Maybe not the horizontal one, but probably the more vertical ones. And also, if at some point those guys living on the shore, they come over, then here in Munich, maybe we'll think about how to welcome them, and maybe we'll go to Garmisch, and it's kind of up on the hill, and then we'll feel safe. So climate change is everywhere, and that's also another area where probably people are not protected enough. Then COVID, that was our first experience of worldwide pandemic. So maybe not first experience, because we knew that there were plenty of them, unfortunately, in the early century, if you think about the Spanish flu. but that was the first one in the modern world. And that's another risk where you can see that unlike some of the other risks, it's happening to lots of people at the same time, and it's a real challenge from an insurance standpoint because we like independent risk. Luckily, we found a vaccine, but even if you think about the vaccine, then it's complex. Some of the first one needed to be in very cold places, and you need to think about transportation. So lots of different new risks as well that are faced nowadays, and pandemic is another one. So then crops, for example, and agriculture. So think about this summer. It was a lovely summer, even in Brussels, where we are located, lots of sun, but of course then drought was everywhere. And now lots of rain, and so it's hard to cope with that if you think about agriculture. Now champagne is developed near London, and that's great, in Brussels, near Brussels, and in Belgium as well. So great to have champagne probably in other places than France, my home country, but doesn't make any sense. And then how to cover those crops. And here you can see drones. There's a lot of technology that can be developed around those kinds of new risks. And then geopolitics, so conflict at our doorsteps. It's very close to here. It's even closer here in Munich than in Brussels. And those types of risks, so there's the risk of war. There's plenty of other risks related to geopolitics. As you may have heard, Lloyd is involved in protecting some of those ships transporting grains out of Ukraine. So this is another way to show that every day you need to innovate. You need to innovate about covering new risks that are a bit everywhere. So if I pause there for a moment, we've looked at 5 different types of risk. So each of them pose real challenges, but each of them need to be considered for what they are, but also cumulatively. So insurers are not only covering and looking at risk independently, they look at also the accumulation of all those risks all together. And this is where we start to have a problem, because, so as I said, there are more risks, more systemic, more interconnected, and also less random. So as I've mentioned, independency and also being random, that's the essence of insurance. That's the only way where we can ask each of you to pay a little piece of premium to cover major catastrophe. But if they all happen at the same time, then this is what we call systemic risk, and we start to have an issue. Having said that, even in those cases, even when we start to face the systemic risk, we can still use insurance, because if all of us are insured here in this room, then we're going to create this capacity to cover even for systemic risk, and then you can think about government scheme who could then play at a later stage. But that idea that we would all take that cover is absolutely essential for the survival of this planet, so that we can share risk. And this is where we move from what we call mutualization to solidarity. And this is where the role of innovation is absolutely key. And that's why I started by telling you a bit of a story, because since the 17th century, we are looking at this, we are trying to innovate, and we are partnering. One of the things which is so special about Lloyd's is that it's a marketplace. And as I've mentioned, there were ship owners, brokers, customers. I didn't mention by then what we were calling the names. So you know those British lords who had plenty of money and who are covering for those risks. Nowadays, it's more traditional companies. So on our platform at Lloyd's, we have Munich Re, AXA, SCOR, lots of different companies from everywhere in the world, but I was mentioning first the European ones. We have capital which is coming from pension funds, private equity. So it's just showing that we need everybody, so all the human beings on the planet, covering those risks, either by bringing more money to that kind of marketplace, or taking covers. And then if we do that, then all together we'll be able to cover for those risks. If then we are all together, we're going to address what we call then this protection gap, which is this issue that some of us, maybe not in this room, but outside of this room, are not covered. And then this is where we would move from an E in ESG to S, and where we're going to cover the social risk as well. So all of this is linked together. So why are we here? Well, basically, we need you, and by you, I mean those insurtech who are in the room and outside, because there's this long history of innovation, and Lloyd, as a marketplace, is welcoming innovation. I was mentioning the fact that there were lots of different stakeholders on the market, and we've always partnered with other people who are outside of this marketplace to bring them in and be part of this innovation and this solidarity. So what we do at Lloyd's, we have what we call the Lab Lloyd's, and or Lloyd's Lab, sorry. And this is a place where we welcome insurtech and startups. We have launched a certain number of cohorts. We are now at the number 10. And what we do is that we welcome them in London, in this iconic building, as I've mentioned. And in this rather cool place on the 4th floor, you have the Lloyd's Lab. And we welcome them for a few weeks. And this is where they can be mentored by some of our syndicates, so the insurance companies who are operating on the market. And this is where they start to learn more about what we do, our specific risks, so those so-called distress risks that we are covering. And they learn more about pricing, and it can be so mentorship in all types of dimensions. We can also offer them more access to distribution. This is an opportunity then to grow their network. We are organizing events, and that's how they can grow. If we think about then what we would like to do in Europe, so what we are thinking of is that they can be, so it was, those were started from everywhere in the world, but now we can concentrate also on more European features, either about those risks that I've mentioned, so because some of the risks can be more specific to some of the regions that we are covering here in Europe. It could be as well that, so it could be on any type of products. Either it's a product which is going to solve some of the issues that we are facing on cyber. You know, there are lots of startups developing on scanning IT systems. I mentioned that we are operating on large risks, but it doesn't mean that it's only large corporates. It's also SMEs, and we want to protect them as well. Lots of the SMEs have no coverages at all on cyber. Then it could be more on the back office side. So there's policy systems, there's artificial intelligence, which is all over, and machine learning on pricing. They're also pricing, artificial intelligence is also very active on the claim side. And I would say also think about this marketplace that I've mentioned, which was in this pretty cool coffee shop created by George Lloyd. This is where actually you can think differently about becoming more digital. So you've seen the place in this iconic building at Lloyd's, but as you can guess, while we survived COVID, we became more virtual. And one of the challenges for this marketplace, which was one of the first one, and as I was saying, pretty modern for the 17th century, is that we need to become more digital. And it's how to make sure that this exchange place, where we try to meet supply and demand, becomes more digital. So any innovation on that side to then help this platform to become even more digital would be welcomed. So lots of different ideas, and this is where we would welcome partnering with you, welcoming you on one of those future cohorts, and making it more European to solve some of our European-based issues. I was mentioning the protection gap. If you think about the US, what we call the penetration rate is 3%. That's premium compared to GDP. It's only 2% in Europe. So there's 1% difference. It not only on the types of risks that we are covering, could be health, and because we have the welfare state here in Europe, but definitely it shows that Europe needs to step up in terms of covering its risk, and that's all the risks I've mentioned: cyber, pandemic, climate change-related risk. So, so you have some of us here today and tomorrow in Munich, some of our teams. We are based out in Brussels, which is a pretty cool place. We have the best chocolate, the best waffles, the best fries. I'm not too sure I can say the best beer in this environment. But come over, and then you'll be the ones probably concluding on that key question. And don't hesitate to meet with us. So you have the names here, and we'll be around today and tomorrow. Thanks a lot.